when I turn this recorder on, it's literally an adventure without me even going anywhere, without my body moving. And I'm constantly and continuously fascinated by this experience. And I'm forever grateful for this podcast and this platform that really allowed me to discover that I can have this experience. It's truly magical. And without this platform, I don't know if I would have been able to go on this adventure. So, thank you, technology, and thank you, whoever thought of this, whoever thought of podcasting. Thank you. My partner and best friend recently put out an episode of the Stop Sinking Show, which is the sister podcast of this show. The episode is episode 51, and it's called Conceived Communication. And in the episode, he talks about how in his state of sickness that he kind of feels flustered and perhaps doesn't communicate as well with the person who is asking him if he wants soup or if he wants tea or if he wants this or that, offering remedies, offering something for him to accept in his time of need. And when I was listening to this episode, my heart went out to him because he is a master articulator. And it's almost like when he's not feeling well, that when he's sick, that feels, that same gift feels overwhelming for him. And one of the things that he mentioned was that he feels bad sort of agreeing to something that maybe is offered to him, because if he doesn't eat it, like, for example, soup or whatever, but if he doesn't consume it, then he feels bad that the person ended up making it and going through the effort to make it. And as somebody who's been so blessed to be in his life and have the place that I do, to be his best friend, I have learned more about him probably than anyone. And through my relationship with him and through all of the experiences that it has so generously and wisely offered, I've learned so much about children, and I've learned so much about myself. I've realized that when I was listening to his episode, that there's something there that I may have noticed before. And it's this fear of the other person going through physical effort to make something, and then it not being received by you. And one thing that I've noticed in my relationship with my partner is that there's been this fear on both ends, but the fear has been different. It's almost like my partner, in my point of view, has been afraid to ask for things physically, which means that he assumes probably more of the physical burden than he should. And in my relationship with him, over the course of 10 years of living together, he has taken most of that burden. For me, I think I'm afraid and have been deeply afraid in my life to ask for what I might need emotionally. And so while my partner has assumed so much of the physical burden, I think I have assumed a lot of the emotional burden. And this imbalance really, truly proved itself to be unsustainable. And while my partner grew in the ways in which he assumed that burden and felt more responsible than he probably should have, I weakened in those areas, and probably vice versa. Right? Because we only become strong at what we hold ourselves responsible to and responsible for. And I think we've really come to realize that this burden in our relationship needs to be shared, that every burden needs to be shared. Because an unhealthy relationship really just means unhealthy individuals. And so the relationship that was unsustainable meant that there was something fundamentally imbalanced about me, that at the age of 33, that I hadn't grown physically as much as maybe the people around me. And maybe there are ways in which my partner, I kept him from growing emotionally because I assumed so much of the emotional burden. And there's something I know from our childhood or very early in our life where we grow to think that we are or we should be responsible for more than we actually are. Sometimes we learn this from our parents. We see them working hard the way they do, and we feel like that we also need to match their level of responsibility. And maybe that came from your father figure who was super responsible and took on the physical responsibility of your entire family. Or if you're like me, maybe you became emotionally responsible because you had a parent who didn't exemplify that, who perhaps was so far on the opposite extreme that out of your own survival, you learn to read people very early and attune to their needs. And it's become my superpower. And I'm pretty sure my partner, who is across the world managing his household, his father's finances, still his finances, and the current household where I live, who is juggling more than is physically possible for most people while he is keeping records and keeping track of and on top of everything for his father's cancer treatment at this time. There's no doubt that these things become our superpower, and that assuming the burden or assuming responsibility, anything that we assume, we become strong at. But when we take on more than perhaps we are truly accountable for, the imbalance there then creates something that is perhaps not healthy, even within us. It creates a part within us, or it keeps a part within us from growing. And if it's not growing, it's stagnant. And any part of us that remains stagnant, as time passes, as the clock ticks on and life moves on, there will constantly be challenges in our life, or just experiences that bring out these stagnant parts of us. And I think about in my own life how, well, the greatest example of the consequences of not being physically responsible enough, which truly meant that I wasn't doing enough with my life. The greatest consequence of that is that it took a toll on my gift, which is my emotion, which so much of that is created in my mind. So the consequences of me not assuming physical responsibility in our relationship meant that I wasn't assuming it in my own life. And because I didn't do that, that meant that I wasn't using my time. And because I wasn't using my time, I wasted my mind. And my mind started to, well, idle hands are the sign of the devil. I understand that for the first time in my life today, after 3 decades of being idle. And so I actually wanted to have this conversation today and talk about this today, because if you recognize that maybe you are like me, or you are similar to my partner in the aspect that you feel bad for asking for something physically, even if that means that even if that manifests as caring so much about the effort that somebody puts into preparing something. I mean, my partner also said that that when he was younger and his mother used to make him iced tea, that sometimes she would give him this whole big mug of iced tea in his favorite mug. It was like this huge mug, probably like, I don't know what, like a 32-ounce mug. It was pretty big. And sometimes she would hand it to him, and in his first sip, he could taste the dish soap. And he would feel bad that she went through all this effort to make this iced tea for him, and he couldn't consume it. And that led to I'm sure, a host of emotions. But it's an interesting perspective to me, because it doesn't really resonate with me. I don't think I've felt that way in my life. And I think if I were to try to put my finger on where that could come from, that feeling of overly caring about the effort that somebody puts into something, right? Into preparing something, that really comes from your own empathy. And my partner has deep empathy, and perhaps extreme empathy for the physical effort, for the physical care that goes into the process. And it makes sense when I think about the kind of human being that he is. The great productivity that comes from him, the great producer, the great creator, the great doer that he is. Of course, he values doing. But is there a way to still value doing and still not feel deeply bad if somebody has done something for you and it doesn't go well, or you can't receive it, or you're unable to receive it, or in the case of my partner, not sure if in his state of illness is if he really wants the soup, and if his mom makes it or somebody makes it for him, and if he does not receive it, should he still feel bad? And I would argue, I would say no. I would say he shouldn't feel bad. Because in the same way, for someone like me that perhaps maybe is afraid to ask for what I need emotionally, I could still ask for a sorry. I can ask for an apology, even if I don't get one. Even if I do receive it and it doesn't make me feel better, it doesn't change anything. Whatever the outcome, I still should be able to bring up what I need emotionally, even if I feel flustered, even if I am not sure how I feel about it, even if I'm not even sure about what I need. And I shouldn't feel bad about that. And I remember just a few days ago, I was talking to my partner, same person, and I was telling him how sometimes when I think about posting on social media, I have thoughts of validation, like who will think about this, or who will think what about this post that they see. And he pointed out something so beautifully to me. He said that it's not all bad, that it doesn't have to be a bad thing, that I can actually use that to my advantage. And when he said that, it really got me thinking. Well, my first reaction was sort of like a calming relief over my body, which I felt gratitude, and I thanked him immediately. Because sometimes all we need is just someone to make us feel okay about ourselves, about the way that we are, even if it's just the way that we are in this moment. And my partner is truly a gift in that sense, because every flaw of mine that I have brought to his attention, he has accepted, and I don't think he's ever made a big deal out of one. And he just loves me through as if it's nothing, as if it's the most beautiful part of me, as if it's a gift. And sometimes, I don't know what I would do without that love in my life. Maybe I'd still be fine, or maybe I'd figure out one way or another how to love myself, but it's been so much easier, and it's been the greatest gift to have that unconditional love in my life, and for someone just to let me know that I'm okay. I'm okay. So when I was listening to his latest podcast episode, and he talked about how he used the word self-loathing, and my heart just went out to him, because that's my best friend. And I would never hate him for his gift, because that confusion that he feels in articulating what he needs at that moment probably comes from the same gift that he has as a master of articulation. Because the deep complexity of his thoughts and of his thought process is probably the same reason that he feels flustered in that moment, because he doesn't have the energy or the mental willpower at that moment, at that time when he's sick, to even sort through or to think clearly, or any variety of reasons when he's not feeling optimally that cause him to feel overwhelmed in that moment. And that's my heart. That's my heart, and that's the greatest human being who also delivers every single other podcast that delivers so much value, and whose thoughts make the world a better place, whose ability to comprehend things, to understand things, and then explain them in ways that truly are life-changing. That same gift, I can imagine, is not always easy to carry. And my partner, I hope, never feels bad again for asking for what he needs, even if he doesn't receive it. And I think about a child who, if they want something to eat, will ask for one thing after another without feeling bad that they just asked their mom for a grilled cheese and then broccoli and cheese soup and didn't eat either of those two things and now wants her rice and chicken that she's eating. Is there some balance there? I mean, as we get older, of course we don't behave the same way. But the child doesn't internally feel bad, despite asking his mom for a multitude of things which he doesn't consume. And maybe it's because he doesn't understand that there is effort required in each thing's preparation. As adults, we know that. But can we still ask for something if we're not sure if we need it? I would say yes. I would say that even when we don't know how we feel, then we can depend on the people closest to us, at least. We can trust them when we ask for what we need. We can trust ourselves in just that moment, in just that asking, even if we don't receive it, even if we don't eat it. Because in those moments of confusion, we still have some decision to make. And we still deserve something. We always deserve something. We are always worthy. Even if we are not fully sure of what that might be, of what we need. So my heart goes out to my best friend. And my heart stays with me, fills me to let me know that I too will ask for what I need emotionally, will ask for a sorry, will let somebody know when I feel hurt, when my feelings feel hurt, when my heart feels hurt, even if I'm not fully understanding the situation or how I feel. Because it's through trusting in those moments of confusion that we gain more clarity. In those moments, and maybe in every. And the other thing that I really pulled from this situation is that we don't need to have all the answers. And sometimes in these moments, where we don't have clarity, that's not only how we gain the answer, but we also learn to trust, right? Because in those moments, it feels harder to trust when we don't know what we need and we've got to make a decision because we just feel some way. I feel some way emotionally, or my partner feels some way in his body that really doesn't feel good. Through trusting ourselves and knowing that it's okay to trust ourselves when we don't have clarity, when we make that decision, one thing is for sure that comes out of that situation, and it is more clarity. And we are always worthy if we feel like that there's a chance that we might need something, or we are inclined in the moment, or even thinking that we might need something is enough, or even thinking logically that, okay, I probably, soup probably is something good for me in this moment because I feel under the weather. Whether I eat it or not, I'm not really sure if I can commit to that, but I can try, and I deserve to have that bowl in front of me. Or I deserve to even take a spoon. Both are okay. Everything is okay. Just trust yourself in every moment that you find yourself in, even if it doesn't feel like your best, because surely and certainly it is getting you there. Every moment plays a role in the bigger picture of who we become and who we truly, truly wish to be. And really, it's those moments where perhaps we have less clarity that make us more of who we know we can be than even the other moments. That's really where a lot of our growth probably takes place. Even when it feels like our superpower, which might be constantly moving, being a great doer, having high levels of productivity, even when that superpower is compromised or feels compromised or is compromised because your body, which is not feeling well, literally slows you down. And now you don't feel like your usual self. So your superpower doesn't feel as strong in that moment. But you'll still learn and grow from that moment. That I know. And if you're like me and you often find yourself with this gift of emotional well-being, emotional connection and intelligence. And you give that so readily, and you attune to other people's needs, sometimes effortlessly. With my kids, it has really come to that point. But then there are other moments where I feel hurt. I feel like this superpower that I have, I mean, where did it go? I feel so small. I feel so tiny and confused, and sometimes my heart races, other times my body shakes. How could it be my superpower and I still feel so without it sometimes? The other day, my mother-in-law playfully said, "I hate you," after I said, "I love you." And I realized for me that that wasn't okay, that that didn't feel, in that moment at least. I don't know if there was another moment which maybe that would have felt more okay. But in that moment, I truly realized that it wasn't okay for me. And so I talked to her about it later. And I don't know if I made the right decision, because my overthinking mind thought of how I was off my schedule and how I hadn't worked out, and how I hadn't slept, and I just been off my schedule, and all of that ultimately doesn't matter, does it? Because in that moment, that's what I need. And I trusted myself in that moment to tell her that I felt hurt by it. To tell her that I don't know why I would ever want to tell you I love you. And I don't know why you would ever why anyone would ever want to respond that way. Do you know the place in my heart that that comes from? Like, I say that to everybody and no one responds that way. And there are so many things that I could go further and have gone further into analyzing since I've said these things to her that day a few days ago. But ultimately, none of it matters. Because in that moment, I felt like doing that. I felt like standing up for myself, if you would even call it that. Or even in just that moment, I felt like that's what I needed to say. That's how I felt, and that's what I needed to tell somebody. And my partner is a really, really beautiful example of this, because he says that we need to teach people how to treat us. And my mother-in-law, for many years actually, while I lived underneath her floor in her house, and as she fed me dinner, as she fed me every meal that she fed her son for like 3 years or so, I didn't actually know that there was a word that I was using with her that she didn't feel good about. And the word was the word silly. And it came out like 3 years later that actually, in the midst of another situation, it kind of came out that she wasn't happy with the fact that I used this word. And I guess her interpretation of the word was definitely a different, she had assigned it a different meaning that, than in the way that I would use it with her. And the way in which I would use it with her was, "You're so silly, you didn't have to do that." And it was really in gratitude for something beautiful that she would do. But I think her idea of the word, or its meaning, was somehow that it should only be used for, a child, when speaking to a child or when referring to a child. And it wasn't appropriate to use, for an adult like her. That's my understanding of it anyway. But I've realized that my mother-in-law and I probably have this similar nature. Some part of us in which life somehow either allowed us to grow or kept us from growing. And her not communicating that with me, I mean, I don't know how much it bothered her or for how long, or if it bothered her every time that I used it. I have no idea. But my mother-in-law has said to me before, playfully, of course, right? When I would say, I love you, she would say, I hate you. I hate you. And she would say it with like that, like with a bit of laughter. And I think now, and I realize in my body now, that even if somebody were to say it playfully, that would never be okay with me. Like, it would just be like those are strong words. And you can say the word hate playfully, but it still carries its own energy. So I don't know how much this has bothered me before in the times that she said it to me before, but it probably did on some level. And it only became clear to me on that day when I was off my schedule. I'd been off my schedule for a few days and I hadn't exercised or meditated. And I try to do both of those things before I reach out to anybody. And that's on a daily basis, right? So in my everyday, I try to take care of myself before I present myself to the world or to anybody. And I hadn't done that day. But I also didn't expect that, what would happen, what happened would happen. And I'm actually really grateful in hindsight that it did, because it really allowed me to, in that moment where I didn't have any of the other things that I felt like armor me on a daily basis, maybe, right? Like exercise and meditation and sleep and good food, nutrition. Not having any of those things really brought me to my core, to my bare bones structure, which protested. My body doth protested when it heard, I hate you. And I realized that that's just, those are strong words. And I wouldn't offer them to anybody lightly, nor would I accept them from anybody lightly. So it's been a lesson for me to ask for what I emotionally need, even though emotions are my superpower. That there are still some times where I feel completely weak. I'm still grateful for those moments because they make me stronger. They make me more emotionally powerful when I realize what it is that I need in those moments. And I hope that I become more attuned to my own emotional needs, because I think my inclination in my life so far has really been to be attuned to the emotional needs of others. And it makes me phenomenal with kids. And I think because it's so easy for me to work with children that I feel safe there. But I also want to learn to protect myself emotionally, and that really means asking for what I need, right? Not avoiding those situations, or avoiding any situation, but protecting my heart in the sense where I ask for what I need emotionally, because that's what makes me a better human being. And I'm worthy of that. I can accept that because it's the same thing that I give. Why wouldn't I accept that? If you give physically, or if you give intellectually, or if you give in any way, why wouldn't you accept the same thing in return? You are worthy of that same thing. You are more worthy than anybody when it comes to that same thing that you offer. So, open your heart and open your hands to receive that apology or that bowl of soup on your best day, and especially on your worst. I love you, my friends. Go ask for an apology and go have some soup. I'll see you. I love you.